There's a slight problem with the Bugatti V4. Here's the thing. I'm already seeing the comments of people being like, oh, your chicken strips are bad. If you guys don't know what chicken strips are, that is usually, it's a motorcycle slang. If you have large chicken strips like these, it means that you're not using your motorcycle to its fullest capability, and you're most likely not ready for that motorcycle. And here's the thing. This is my new Panigale V4. And yeah, the chicken strips on this bike are pretty decently large, right? Like, that's why I'm seeing comments of people being like, oh, you're not using the whole tire. Here's the thing, man. Yeah, the bike only has 92 miles on the dash. You typically want to break it. You're gonna be dragging knee as much. You're gonna be kind of...
Yo, what up, everybody? Oh, it is fucking cold. Oh, son of a bitch.
We have sad news. We have officially a sleep divorce. We got sleep divorce because the bed, there's no room. I sleep on the floor now.
Too big.
Me?
Too big.
Sleep on the floor.
Too small.
He's too big.
Too big. Yeah.
We have.
Lunarbox just uploaded a debate with Unhinged TikToker about Israel-Palestine. Can we react later tonight or tomorrow? Yeah, sure. I also wanted to see his debate with Bad Empanada. That guy's a complete fucking whack job, too. Ugh.
Well, I need to have one indecent proposal for you.
An indecent proposal as you get down on your knees.
Don't spurg out on Connor. He's a chill guy.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, he, seems pretty cool. Thanks for the donation, retard.
I'm
Dude, he's paying $14.50 a month on a Bugatti Veyron lease.
flattered, Wizard, but
I know you're going through some troubles with your taxes and all that stuff.
I'm almost done, yeah.
And you have a smorgasbord of bills, probably 15 to 20 grand worth if you tally every single car up.
Yeah. Bugatti Veyron, over 250 miles per hour, the fastest car in the world in this day, thanks to a quad-turbo 16-cylinder engine with over 1,000 horsepower. And I definitely know every month that has gone by because every month, $14,570.27 is deducted from my bank account for the lease payment on this Bugatti Veyron. But the good news is I did a sign and drive lease and the car has completely paid for itself for for the last 6 months. I am out zero money for anything, but that is all about to change. And I did make a big mistake when it came to the tax implications of leasing this Veyron. So today we're going to talk about how my Veyron has been for the last 6 months and the sign and drive lease, and how the zero sum that I put into this car so far is about to change dramatically and quickly. And also we're going to head to the car wizard to check on a couple other heavy hitters. My Audi R8 apparently has some more serious issues, and the Ferrari 599, after having $7,000 worth of work done, had to check engine lights immediately after I drove away, and it quit shifting. The gated manual conversion started to go all wonky. So hopefully there's some good news there, but I know there's some bad news on the R8. For the Veyron, it's been a total dream, but let's get into reality that's starting to set in. Last week, the boys were in town. Their automation, I'm cutting an absolute crap ton of money, but so far I'm out $0. So how is that possible? Well, first of all, the Lamborghini Countach was like winning the lottery. I bought that car 4 years ago with a Lamborghini Diablo VT Roadster on the same day, paid $250,000 for both cars. I sold the VT Roadster for $280,000, something like that, and definitely didn't spend more than 30 grand fixing it up. So that meant I was zero into the Countach. Nothing at all. Drove it for 4 years. Obviously, those cars massively appreciated, and I traded it in for this Bugatti Veyron. Now, I did also trade in my BMW Z8, but that wasn't necessary to do the deal. It just made the payment a little bit cheaper, so a little bit of a technicality there. Now, obviously, there's an opportunity cost because I could have sold that Countach and had a bunch of cash, but then I thought I'd be paying a bunch of capital gains or income taxes on that huge gain on the Countach.
Yo, what up, dude?
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Not much. What's going on?
Hey, my mic's messing up a little bit, so I'm gonna mess with it real quick. If it doesn't work at all, then I'll just switch back to the mic that I know that works.
Okay, sure. That's no problem. I do not hear you. I do not hear you.
All right.
Now I hear
Unfortunately,
you.
I'm gonna have to use my microphone without some sound capture stuff that helps mute random sounds. So if the noise is not as good as it usually is, my apologies. But it should still be sufficiently good for a conversation.
Well, it's fine. You sound good.
Okay. And then chat let me just double check my chat can hear me real quick, and then we'll get cracking. Settings, audio is set to Don or Jack, and they should be able to hear me. Okay, very cool. I think we're good. Then, good morning, good afternoon to you, sir. How are you this fine day?
Pretty damn good. Yeah, so I was hearing some of your discussion, debate thing with Destiny. You're talking about how you think religion overall is a good thing for society, even though there's not really any justifying it and it's kind of nonsense. It does have benefits for societal cohesion, crap like that. So,
well, I already don't agree with some of your framing. So the truth is that it's not all nonsense. There's a reason why people have clung to religion for thousands of years. There's a reason why people still care about it. It's morality codified through stories that stretch back probably 12,000, 13,000 years. And so I think there's a historical and moral value to studying religion, even if you don't take it literally.
What do you mean by morality codified through stories?
So, for instance, almost every single story, regardless of whether or not you take it literally, it has embedded within it a moral message of what is good behavior and bad behavior. And therefore, you can analyze those stories for what you think actually leads to human flourishing. And then, as a result, use those lessons in order to live your own life.
The issue is based on your interpretation of right or wrong, the hero or the villain in the story may change. So some of the original authors of some of these biblical stories, they may have had vastly different intentions with regards to what is the moral of the story, who's the hero, who's the villain, what's the right, what's the wrong, versus any reader in the future who may interpret things differently based on their own personal views on morality or the culture they live in and whatever cultural influences that they may have. So, so with that in mind, I think that storytelling, like there obviously is some kind of motive in a story to produce some sort of like moral of the story. Like this is right, this is wrong, this is how one should or should not behave. But the idea that you would need a religion for that, and a religion would somehow be immune from that sort of problem of like cultural change and interpretation impacting how a story may be read or interpreted, I don't see that as any kind of unique advantage of religion. Like a future society may uncover Spider-Man comics in the future. That's going, like, there is a moral to a lot of Spider-Man comics. Spider-Man comics are going to have the same exact issue and really be as culturally relevant as any kind of biblical story. I'd say probably more so, because Spider-Man has the luxury of being more contemporary for its day. It is a bit more modernized, and the writers of Spider-Man also have the luxury of thousands of more years of human culture and philosophy to, take from when they're writing these stories versus biblical authors who were remarkably ignorant for their time.
I already don't agree. So you're saying that based off of like time, context, culture, you might interpret stories different. Oh my God. Chung Kicks. Is he one of yours?
I don't recognize that name.
Okay. Or Height IQ?
Don't recognize that name.
Okay.
What are you just getting spammed?
Yeah, it's no problem. They're gone. So anyways, the point is, like, I don't agree with you that it's arbitrary. So if we start with like a biblical story of Genesis and we talk about how nature was created into this, perfect utopia, et cetera, then that's not like, you're never going to change Satan into the good guy. That's not going to happen.
No.
So the moral of the story and the interpretive.
Genesis is actually one of the best examples you could use of that type of story ending up having a vastly different interpretation based on the culture and society that's interpreting it. Genesis is a very similar story to a lot of Greek creation myths, where mankind was trying to steal like fire from the gods, and the gods were worried that mankind would become too powerful and possibly overthrow them. That was likely the intention of the story of Genesis. It's very similar to a Greek myth about human beings obtaining knowledge and power similar to gods, and possibly
it's the story of Prometheus. I have a tattoo of Prometheus on my back.
Yeah.
So
now,
but that doesn't devalue the stories in any way whatsoever.
No, it does. It vastly changes the story, because then in that story, Satan ends up being the good guy. He's the person who gave mankind power.
And
Well, the point you're making was you could never interpret the story where Satan's the good guy. Satan is the good guy in that narrative where human beings were achieving power similar to God's, and God, being fearful and jealous and petty, was trying to prevent mankind from obtaining some sort of
have
power
to forgive
and
me,
knowledge.
okay? I just think it needs to be remarked early in the conversation, because I literally have to keep clicking over for Vegan Gains makes better content than you, and then adding me, and it's spammed a dozen times, and this is like a dozen people. So I've already banned half a dozen to a dozen people, and they're still doing it. Now, I'm not blaming you. You know, there's plenty of schizos who are on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just saying, while we're having this conversation, if these are actual Vegan Gains fans who like interesting debates, it is a disadvantage to be trying to have an interesting conversation about, I don't know, moral philosophy, religion, all that kind of shit, and then to have to constantly look over for people who are spamming in my chat and have to ban them. So if these are actual Vegan Gains people who can hear me from Vegan Gains audience, I invite you to shut the fuck up and stop so I can focus on the conversation.
I can
But
almost
anyways,
guarantee you
so-
they're probably just trolls and they're not actual fans of mine, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But that's okay. They'll just keep getting banned. We'll cut through the people eventually, right?
yeah, I'm sure they'll get tired. You could just put like slow mode on or something, or
No, it's okay. I'll blow through them. It seems like it's a worthwhile net to cast in order to knock them out. But the point is that, like, why would Greek people creating, and by the way, I don't agree that the story of Prometheus is, you know, similar to the book of Genesis, but assuming that Greek people have you know, similar creation myths to the Bible, how does that make either story less significant or substantive?
well, no. The point I was so the topic we were talking about was like, well, these Bible stories, they have important cultural significance because they inform a population on morality, based on like the moral outlook of a story. Now, my point was there's an interaction between the story itself and the culture and individual that's viewing the story. So, based on changing cultural perspectives, the moral of a story could vastly change, especially in circumstances where you no longer have contact with the original author, and the original author never actually gave commentary on the story itself. Like, there's no Coles notes that you can look up where, you know, the author explicitly stated, when X character did this thing, it was to symbolize that, you know, this thing is wrong and you shouldn't have done that. There's no Coles notes.
I don't agree. There's plenty of biblical analysis from the perspectives of people, and there's also like there's also a consistency in messaging that's like analyzable. So I don't find this true. Like the whole point of like so, for instance, with Genesis, right? The whole point is that we had, now I don't believe this part of the story. I'm not a biblical literalist, right? So we had in Eden, you know, the world is a naturally beautiful place. And then still banning people, was a naturally beautiful place. And then human frailty is part of what ruined paradise, right? Now, when it comes to, you know, the knowledge of good and evil, there's actually an argument to be that the concept of the knowledge of good and evil is related to not necessarily like right or wrong, right? So, for instance, we don't associate a predatory animal eating another animal as right or wrong. It's just part of its nature. What's that?
I do.
So you think a lion is evil?
It's
doing something wrong and it knows that it's wrong.
Well, those are two different things. The lion being evil and the lion doing something wrong are two different things. I wouldn't say the lion is evil because it just lacks agency, but I think the lion is doing something wrong.
Okay. Well, I think that nature is probably going to be a more prevalent force than your opinions. But that being said, what I would say, what's that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
I mean that you are probably going to live and die as a vegan following your moral philosophy, and nature is going to spin on with carnivores and omnivores ignorant of your opinion on the consumption of other animal flesh.
You could say
so nature
that
is going to be more powerful.
Well, you
What's
could
that?
say that about mankind.
I agree, but I also I give deference to nature a lot of the time. And so, for instance, like, you can argue that human beings should evolve past the need in order to consume animal flesh because it is a moral wrong, because we do have agency. But I don't think that, you judging nature as immoral is going to have any effect on nature. You can affect human nature. You can't affect animal nature.
Well, yeah, you certainly can.
Well, so you're going to try to evolve lions and tigers past consuming
Well,
meat?
we've done that. We have essentially done that. We've domesticated animals. Like, there's a reason why domesticated
and we
dogs
still feed
are less
them meat.
aggressive. Well, I don't have dogs anymore because my wife left me and she took the dogs, but no, they don't eat meat. They're on a vegan diet. My cat's on a vegan diet.
Okay, well, I think that's crazy pants, but we don't have to dig into that necessarily. I could just explain my difference in moral philosophy. So when it comes to reading into biblical moral philosophy or whatever, the read on it is going to be partially interpretive. I agree that you can interpret into many different directions, but there's going to be consistent interpretations as well. And the knowledge of good and evil, what I've seen the strongest arguments for the knowledge of good and evil is that animals don't have the capacity to judge their own impulses as good or bad. Oftentimes, they're just following their impulses as best they know how within nature, whereas humans have the ability and capacity to analyze their behavior, and as a result, they have the knowledge of good and evil. But with the knowledge of good and evil comes a burden, and that burden is that your behavior actually dictates, the things that you reap and sow in life. And so as a result, with that knowledge, we effectively know that we're in hell because we know that we can affect good and bad on each other. And that's actually the story of Cain and Abel as well, is that as soon as we're like self-aware, you could put knowledge of good and evil into the category of self-awareness. As soon as we become self-aware, Cain commits the first murder and feels shame over it, right? And so that's like the whole it's talking about the birth of human self-awareness and morality.
I'm not sure if feeling shame is a uniquely human characteristic. There's reason to believe.
Not.
Sorry?
I don't think that I'm not a biblical literalist, and so I don't think that there's probably anything that's uniquely human. I think that there's probably sapient creatures on other planets that may look like humans, may look like something completely different, but they are intellectually and emotionally as capable as we are. I don't think that there's some emotional or cognizant uniqueness to humanity, especially on a galactic scale.
Yeah, so I'm not implying that you're some sort of biblical literalist where like the Garden of Eden actually happened and God was actually there and there was an actual tree. I'm not sure if the people who wrote those stories actually believed in those things in that sort of sense, or whether or not these were intended to be allegories. But whatever the case is, depending on your interpretation of, the story of Genesis and the Garden of Eden, that could have a very different moral outlook, and you do see this among Christians. It is less common. There is kind of a more common interpretation of the story, but there are Christians who do view it this way, where this is kind of a take on a Greek story like Prometheus, where God punished humans for obtaining power that was similar to his own. Now, the more common view is that humans are the ones who created sin, and we rebelled against God, and we kind of orchestrated our own destruction, and the whole narrative of like Jesus coming back to Earth and all this other horse shit. That is going to be like our redemption, where we can become closer to God once again. And if you act like a good little slave and do what you're told, well, then you're going to go to the happy place in the sky and, you know, this and that. Now, depending on how you interpret that story, that massively changes who the villain is in the story and who, like, who the good guys are. The villain in the story would be God if you take the, like, Greek sort of interpretation, where this God is just kind of jealous, vengeful, fearful of losing power, just wants dominion for the sake of dominion. And the other story is more of a, like, story that teaches you to be an obedient bitch. You're not supposed to ever disagree or do anything that you're not told to do. You're supposed to be subservient.
That's the story of Lucifer. And then also the Gnostics, which is actually a fairly interesting part of theology, is Gnostics actually believe, or some of them do, I heard a sect of them do anyways, that the God Yahweh is actually a pretender. He's not even the real creator God. He effectively reached out to humanity, like he's actually like Lucifer in this case. There's a plane beyond our own in which the true creator God resides.
Yeah.
And the Gnostic God actually captured us and like enslaved our souls on this plane of existence, and then convinced us to worship him. But all he really does is he puts us into a perpetual cycle of existence and torment for his own benefit. And that the true plane of existence is beyond him. Now, here's the thing, though. I don't know, in reference to all that stuff, I'm going to be profane. I don't know shit about fuck, right? Like, I don't know who the creator God is. I don't know if Yahweh is, or the concept of the creator God is correct. I don't know if there's a plane beyond our own in which everything is created perfect and we can attain that through some kind of bargain with the cosmos. But what I do think is pertinent about these stories is if you look, let's just combine biblical Bible and Prometheus real quick, okay? Combine the narrative of God became angry with humanity for trying to imitate his greatness, and so therefore we suffer in existence, okay? You don't have to take that literally while still kind of knowing what to do as a human being. And so the example of Prometheus, right? He was the god that gave us fire. His punishment for eternity was to be chained to a rock and to have his liver eaten out by, eagles or vultures, depending on the story, for all of eternity. But then it was actually Heracles or Hercules who ends up saving Prometheus from his perpetual torment by the gods. Well, Prometheus is kind of presented as a sympathetic and self-sacrificial figure similar to Jesus, where he knows what the right thing is. The right thing is to give knowledge and power to humanity because they are like a beautiful species capable of great things. And he does that kind of knowing that he's going to suffer the consequences from the pantheon. And then his redemption is Hercules saving him from perpetual torment. And so regardless of whether or not you take the biblical narrative or if you take the Greek narrative, the message is relatively speaking the same, is that you can do good things in this life that are morally correct. You will still be punished for them, but enduring that suffering is a part of what makes a noble creature noble. And I think that's both found in biblical, if you want to call it mythology, you find that in biblical and Greek mythology. And I think that's a beautiful lesson. Those are lessons like worthy of telling our children.
Yeah, but you don't need religion for that. You could just have them read Berserk.
Okay, but different stories are going to have different levels of weight. And on top of that, like, so you're saying like, oh, I can find that in Spider-Man. Oh, I can find that in Berserk. Okay, you can. Berserk and Spider-Man also don't carry the weight of 12,000 years worth of history. These are humanity's most ancient stories. Well, Berserk doesn't have the same weight as the Bible.
I'd say it has more weight because, again, the author has the luxury of thousands of years of human wisdom to draw upon to craft a better story.
we have the advantage of thousands of years of evolved human wisdom with which to analyze the stories. Why would you think so? Hold on. Let me ask you what you would want to achieve. Would you want the world to be less literalist, or would you want them to straight up like ban and forget ancient religions?
Well, I don't think that's like the dichotomy. We can look at biblical stories and analyze them and, you know, talk about how they're relevant to us and whether or not they have like good morals or meaning to us. That's totally fine. My issue is with the idea that, well, there's A, interpretation of this, and B, this is a story that came from like some all-powerful God and you have to believe in it in some sort of way or else X, Y, Z will happen.
Well, the you know, looking at it from a, not even Christians necessarily can make these arguments, even though they do. They just can't make these arguments coherently. Even within Christianity, like there's varied interpretations of the Bible to the point that they have had like sectarian conflicts over a vast array of interpretations. And so you have like the iconoclasts in early church history who believe that you couldn't worship graven images, and the cross and depictions of God and Christ was actually a form of paganism that was prohibited by the church. And they went to war over this. They were killing each other.
Well, yeah, and I mean, why did they go like, look, there's discussions in like the anime manga community over whether or not Griffith did anything wrong. Now, no one's literally fighting to the death over whether or not Griffith did anything wrong. It's just, you know, it's your own personal interpretation and what happened, like, you know, what's right and wrong in the story. Now,
but
why
if we
are
move
people
to an atheist frame, if we move to an atheist frame, do you think that we're suddenly going to forget all these tribal instincts and desires to fight?
Well, no, I do think there will be things to fight over, but that specifically, this idea of, did Griffith do anything wrong? Why is that not starting wars and like fights, like at least like on a more local level, like maybe gang members, like there's, you know, somebody who's subscribed to one anime fandom and, you know, some other like...
Yeah, because they believe it to be fiction.
Well, right. And I mean, fiction is fiction, but I don't think these stories are any less meaningful to people. Like if you talk to people who, you know, read Berserk, and some people have literally only read Berserk because that is such a good story. They're not even interested in anime or manga, but they've only read Berserk. And you can find like many videos of people talking about how it got them through depression. It kind of helped focus their life. I don't think those stories are any less meaningful to people than, you know, somebody who might read the Bible. So there's clearly a reason why people are waging wars over, you know, biblical interpretations, like whether or not it's okay to fuck with a condom or like what day you should take off during the week to only eat fish or something. There's a reason why wars are being fought over that, but not over whether or not Griffith did anything wrong. And I think it's because...
I would say that's
I think it's because there's a delusional sort of idea behind these texts where they have some kind of true meaning behind them. And if you don't interpret that the right way, well, you're going against God, and going against God, oh, well, now there's some like divine punishment or something associated with that.
Sure. There's a, I'll admit to this already. Powerful men throughout history have used the promise of paradise in order to motivate massacre in the name of God. And so they'll get peasants at the fate, like the fifth son of nobles, to go on crusades, because even though they might die in the crusade, they'll be forgiven by God and granted eternal paradise. We actually see this with jihadists as well. Jihadists are effectively people who are promised paradise and virgins and sex and all that kind of stuff, pleasures of this plane of existence. They're promised that, but the way that they achieve it is through getting killed in war. And
that was the whole idea
of course,
behind Islam.
Yeah, so the power of men to use the promise of paradise to motivate like slaughter is not lost on me. What I would say, though, is that oftentimes in anti-theist circles, so people who abhor religion, they think that once we ban religion or once we move past religion, we'll somehow like reach this new enlightened secular age. But if you look at the 20th century, or if you even look at modern American politics, it seems like tribalism is like a really easy, like a human psychological phenomena to appeal to. And therefore we find new gods and new ideologies to worship. I would say that the the cult of personality around Donald Trump is evidence about this. And then I also think that the fervor and zealotry with which communists talk about a communist revolution is also evidence of people taking religious passion and applying it to secular ideologies.
Yeah, so I think we literally are a species of ape. So any creature that is part of the superfamily Hominoidea, by definition, is an ape. We are apes. Just so, I don't know if there's any religious people in your audience who don't understand that. It's just a simple taxonomy definition. We're literally apes.
we're really smart apes.
Yeah, and as such, we basically behave as chimpanzees would behave if they had human knowledge and wisdom. So chimpanzees are highly tribal. They live in tribal societies. The only big difference is they're less intelligent, they can't make guns, and their social groups are smaller. So we behave in a kind of way that you'd expect chimps to behave. Now, I think it's much easier to, say, convince somebody to go murder the Quraysh tribes, like the Prophet Muhammad convinced his followers to do, when you say, well, God wants you to do this, and if you do this, you're going to get 72 virgins in heaven, and you're especially, this is convincing when you're talking to dumbasses who probably have unibrows, are ugly as shit, and had no realistic prospects of ever having a wife, let alone many wives, and the kind of wealth and riches that the Prophet Muhammad was promising, versus using some kind of secular means to convince somebody to do this. So Trump is convincing a lot of people to, say, hate immigration by saying things like, they're all drug dealers, rapists, murderers, they're coming over here, killing everybody. The problem with that sort of claim motivating somebody to, say, go out and kill immigrants or non-whites is that these are empirical claims that can very easily be proved or disproved. You can't really prove or disprove, well, God's going to give you 72 virgins in heaven. That may or may not be true. And again, it's when you're talking to stupid people, only stupid people are going to believe in something like that. When you're talking to somebody about whether or not immigrants, non-whites, or drug dealers, rapists, murderers, yes, dumb people will believe in something like that, but the bar has to be set very, very, very low. You have to be exceptionally fucking stupid to believe in something like that.
I don't agree. So the thing about it is you might have to be dumb in order to fall for the specific propaganda that most immigrants are rapists or criminals, right? I think that appeals to our chimp brain, so to speak. But there are also wildly intelligent, powerful people who view populism as a vehicle to achieve power, and therefore they throw their lot in with Trump. And so as an example, like Stephen Miller is what we saw earlier. He was like the deputy chief of staff of the White House or something like that. He's openly lying about Kilmar Abrego Garcia being like an MS-13 gang member. Yeah. And so is Pam Bondi. These are both probably highly educated, wildly intelligent people, but they're playing a power game. And so they have no problems basically lying. They might take like a few kernels of truth here or there that their audience can grab onto and use as talking points, but they're effectively propagandists or liars. And so my point, though, being like, we're starting with religion, we're kind of moving into politics and power, is that power abhors a vacuum, and eliminating ideology, like eliminating religious ideology, doesn't all of a sudden replace it with something better. So you were saying. You were saying that, like, well, these religions, they enslave people to believe in a certain, code of conduct and story that effectively makes you, I forget if you call it like slave or cuck or something like that, to religion. That might be true, but there are redeemable moral aspects of religion that should probably be carried forward almost no matter what. And some of those things, as an example, are within the, there's a historical interpretation of the 10 Commandments, but there's no problem with saying, thou shalt not lie. There's no problems with saying, thou shalt not murder. There's no problems with saying, what is it? I guess you shall not bear false witness is the same as lying, but you should honor your mother and father. There's like no problems with any of those. Generally speaking, those are good rule books for society for people to kind of like anchor their lives around, regardless of whether or not they believe it literally or not.
We can kind of delve into that. So, I would say there's two main points there, or two main points I have against that idea. I don't completely disagree that, yeah, there are some aspects of religion that are commendable, like thou shalt not bear false witness. That's a great one. The issue, though, is in order for that to have been written to page, the society or culture would have had to have had that idea in the first place, before some of these religious concepts were formed. Thus, what was the need for the religion? The society already valued those things. Nobody just came up and said, hey guys, I know that we're really into bearing false witness all the time and we love lying, but I was just talking to Sky Santa and he said, sorry, we can't really do that anymore.
But this is incorrect. This is incorrect. There is a historical analysis of the Bible in which the Bible is effectively, especially the Old Testament, it's the history of the Semitic people, right? It's the history of the Jews, right? And of course, there's like mythology put in there, but one of the main mythologies is Moses leading the people out of Egypt. And he was the person who, you could say had the 10 Commandments revealed to him by God, or he was the person who created the 10 Commandments, whatever you wanted to say, right? And the secular historical interpretation of that was that as the leader of the tribe of Judah, Jews, whatever, Israelites, whatever you want to call them, he was expected to be not just the king, but the judge of all of the tribe's affairs. But the tribe was large. It was literally thousands of people. And so he saw the same cases come up over and over again. And so what happened is the establishment of what we understand to be common law, which is where instead of having a judge make justice happen between these people over and over and over again, you instead write down the predictable laws of society so everyone has a general guidebook on which to operate.
Yeah.
And this isn't unique to the Jews, but it is like more exciting with the Jews because the Jews wrote down 10 basic laws for how to live your life, whereas was it the Babylonians? I forget who did Gilgamesh, but the Code of Hammurabi, for instance, I would have to look up when the Code of Hammurabi was written, but that was one of like the first codes of conduct. Like, I'm pretty sure the Code of Hammurabi was talking about like grain, and talking about like taxes and imports and all that kind of shit. And so because of the simplicity and social relevance of the code of conduct of the Jewish people, that's why it became so appealing.
Well, again, this didn't just happen in a vacuum and some dude just came up with it because of religious revelation. Like, you could understand why, practically speaking, people would very easily figure out, assuming human beings do operate somewhat rationally, that it is not a good thing to bear false witness because...
But we have people do it all the time even now.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural reinforcement. We all kind of understand that, lying is bad. We all kind of instinctively understand that, but we have a cultural reinforcement saying that, like, no, not only is it bad, this is one of the cornerstones of our society. And therefore, if you do it, we're going to judge you kind of with the judgment of God.
Yeah. Yes, I understand that. But the point being is none of this required any sort of religious thinking. You can understand why ancient Israeli tribes would have figured out it's not a good idea to bear false witness. They're very, without even thinking about God, there is a very easy to identify practical reality that bearing false witness is a bad idea, and it's fundamentally bad for society and everyone in it. So
but many people,
religion kind of takes a back seat there, and it's like that's not any kind of unique aspect that's not a unique benefit that religion has given us. That is something that just human intuition, ingenuity, and critical thinking has, come to the conclusion to, that bearing false witness is a bad idea. It's just that we also ended up codifying it into religious doctrine because that's just what was culturally relevant at the time.
So there's a charitable interpretation for how we achieved religious revelation, and there's a cynical reason for why we achieved religious revelation. So I think that you'll probably take the cynical, so we'll start with that, and then I'll move to the charitable, because I believe in the charitable, to be honest. So the cynical interpretation for why we codified conduct and why we nested it in religion is because it's easy to explain to a bunch of Copper Age and Iron Age savages. It's easy to explain to them that the creator of the universe wants you to abide by this code of conduct, and that's it. That's the end of the story. The creator of the universe wants you to do it, so you should do it, right? That's easy enough, right? But
I don't think that's exactly how something like that would have happened.
There's no greater authority than the creator of the universe.
Well, no, I don't think...
telling people that God says so is an easy way to end an argument in a tribal and religious society.
So I don't think whoever wrote they probably weren't 10 commandments. They're probably more like 6 or 7 original commandments, and then the other 3 were added later. But whoever wrote, the 10 commandments, I don't think they were thinking in terms of, well, this is obviously better for society, but how do I convince the idiot peasants to believe in this? Oh, I'll say God said it. I don't think that's likely.
Why wouldn't you believe that? That's oftentimes the cynical explanation for religion. So why don't you believe that?
Well, I don't think that's the most likely way that happened. What I think likely happened is these sort of moral beliefs are very personal to people. There's something about morality that just seems objectively true. Like, it's beyond yourself. It's like you discovered something that's beyond your own kind of feeling. It's like when we're talking about child rape. Like, it's just such a guttural feeling. Like, this has to be true outside of myself that it's wrong. So when people have kind of come to are kind of thinking about how society should be sort of run, and they kind of have this epiphany, obviously we should not bear false witness. Like, this is something fundamental to society. I think just because of how people were thinking in that time, how we're connected to some sort of God, that they might have actually genuinely assumed that God may have been talking to them. And on top of that...
No, you're sorry, just to ride off of your momentum, that's the more charitable interpretation of religious revelation, and it's something that I believe is what happened in almost every major religion.
Well, and
I think that the wise men of society were meditating and fasting on how society should be run and how human beings should live their lives. As a result of meditating and fasting, they could have had what they believe to be religious revelations, but could be the product of them fasting or doing hallucinogens. That's another common thing.
That's what I was about to bring up.
Yeah, hallucinogenic revelation. And so these moral epiphanies about, if everybody behaved like X, society would be better. And the reason why they codified it is because they felt like it was divine revelation. They felt like it was God speaking to them through their meditation or through their whatever. And it could, and by the way, personal moral revelations can feel that way, where you feel like you get struck by lightning and all of a sudden you understand how to live your life better. And so the reason why I'm agreeing with you, adding to it and probably stealing some of your thunder, is because that feeling of complete correctness and alignment with the world is oftentimes verified by the consequences of actions when you ignore these behaviors. So when you have pro-social behaviors like telling the truth, loving your wife, not cheating on your wife, not banging your neighbor's wife, honoring your parents, not bearing false witness, all that kind of stuff. When you follow these behaviors, oftentimes society and nature will reward you. Whereas if you ignore these rules, then oftentimes society and culture will punish you. And so sin, in my opinion, isn't just this concept of don't do this, it's bad because God says so. Sin is the revelation through nature and moral meditation that these behaviors are antisocial and will have negative consequences on your life.
Well, yeah, so on the like hallucinogen point, I've actually done magic mushrooms to try to heal from depression. I had depression lifelong. And I think a year ago now, I had a mushroom trip where my depression's being cured. I haven't had any symptoms of depression in the last year. And it wasn't just like I took drugs, felt better, and I've felt better since. It was like I was shown a knowledge that I didn't have before that got rid of the depression. I saw like the universe, and it was like I was being shown that it was completely and utterly meaningless. Like I fully internalized nihilism. And then from there, I was literally shown happiness is just a choice. It was like, it was just on my shoulder, and I could just turn my head and see it. And I just couldn't see it before. And it's hard to describe like what I actually saw on the mushroom trip, but I saw a meaninglessness, and that all of these things that I felt are literally just a choice, and that completely got rid of my depression. Now, I could understand this is probably ancient. Human beings have had experiences like this forever, and I'm sure ancient cultures kind of used hallucinogenic drugs to kind of have these experiences because they thought it is some sort of pathway to enlightenment. Yeah, in all likelihood, some of these things like the Ten Commandments, they were brought about by some sort of psychedelic experiences like that. And I could imagine not only, even if you have an experience like mine where like God wasn't present or evidently present, I could imagine like an ancient person who believes in God would think God showed him this, or God might have actually had an actual presence in the hallucination, and he's like pointing, this is the Ten Commandments. I can understand something like that happening.
I think that hallucinogens, I've only done strong hallucinogens once. I smoked marijuana in high school, but then I did acid one time. I think that hallucinogens can be the things that reveal the thing that's at the tip of your tongue.
Yeah.
It's like on the verge of emanating from subconsciousness into consciousness. And so as a result, like it feels like an epiphany, right? You have an epiphany, and then, it's like it's revealed to you in all its glory. And because you have the hallucinogenic effect of the drug helping you out, you kind of see this like grand vision unfolding of your epiphany, like playing out in reality. And that's funny because the epiphany that I had when I did acid was effectively that like school, because I was graduating high school at the time. I was like, what the fuck did I even learn in all of high school? Like I didn't learn shit. This was bullshit. And then I realized that, I'm a part of like a socialization project in order to show up to the same place every day for 8 hours, be bored out of my fucking mind while I'm there, shut up, do what I'm told, and then go about my life. That's what high school was to me anyways. It wasn't about the education of the things that I learned. It was about socializing me into being a productive member of, I'm not saying this derisively, but capitalist society, right? And so with that revelation, I was like, I have profound intellect. Like I thought it was brilliant. But, a lot of people have come to that realization without hallucinogens. And so I understand, but at least in my opinion, I wouldn't be so dismissive of these things only because it's a miracle that you and I, if you categorize a miracle as like a rare or extreme event, it's a miracle that you and I are intelligent descendants of apes who are able to communicate complex concepts through verbal utterances across the internet. That's like a crazy thing to happen in existence. And it's awesome. And I love it and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't think any of these experiences are like bad or because God didn't do it and it was found out through some sort of hallucination. Oh, well, you did drugs, so who cares if you found this out? If something works, it works. Like, I think we just have a certain set of desires. So most people want to live in a pro-social sort of environment where at the very least people aren't raping, killing each other, and we can kind of get along our daily lives. And this is what these kind of moral values do for us. Like thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill. That's just a bad translation. It's thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
You know,
if I could emphasize that for the chat, because I lived with thou shalt not murder for a really long time. It's obviously thou shalt not kill, because they literally get the 10 commandments and then they sack 2 cities in the land of Canaan. So they kill the inhabitants. In one city, they completely put to the sword. They kill the men, the women, the children, and the livestock. So it's very obviously thou shalt not kill is
no,
not
it's thou shalt not murder.
Accurate translation.
Thou shalt not kill was the thou shalt not kill is the mistranslation.
The anglicized, incorrectly translated, and incorrectly understood passage.
Yeah, so all these things like, you know, the 10 Commandments, it's basically a guideline of pro-social behavior to come up with outcomes that we want. We're trying to come up with a society that we want where we can live the best way we can. And, again, I just haven't seen any reason why necessarily we would need religion for that, because it seems the way that these, you know, religious texts have even come up with these things, they're highly secular in nature. They would have to be. God didn't come out of, you know, the sky and say, this, and this. Somebody took mushrooms and had a kind of out-of-body experience where they had ego death, and they saw themselves as everyone else. And they realized, oh my God, when I do this to somebody else, I'm doing this to myself. That's kind of the idea of pro-social behavior and having like a law, thou shalt not bear false witness. Bearing false witness may benefit you in certain cases, but if everyone does it, it ends up harming you. Same with, you know, murder. If murder's okay, you're going to get murdered.
And even make it a little bit more abstract and weird. So pork and shellfish, right? So I almost guarantee you what happened was there was somebody in the tribe or whatever who ate some shellfish, had an allergic reaction, and died. And they were like, okay, it's not worth the risk, so we're not going to consume shellfish anymore. Same thing with improperly cooked pork. There was probably, everybody was like kind of consuming pork, but there was some guy who just ate it all the time. And as a result of improperly cooked pork, he died because of improperly cooked pork. And so as a result, they said no more pork.
It was probably extremely widespread. There's a certain type of parasite in pork that's particularly deadly.
Right. So these are inferences that we've made, that we've assigned the value of religious revelation that could be like revealed to society over millennia of pro-social behavior. And so I understand that you're trying to strain out the dogma and mythology. But I think that so many people find the dogma and mythology, at least in my opinion, it hasn't even been worth it to try to pry them away from the religion. The only thing that's been worth it conversationally is to talk about the morality that they derive from it. And and then that's where we fight about interpretations. Just as an example, you were talking about Muhammad and how he used the promise of paradise in order to wage war on specific people. That's the same justification that jihadists use in order to commit massacres. But if you look at different parts of the Quran, a different part of the Quran effectively says that what you worship is what you believe is what you believe, and what the other person is what they believe. And it's ultimately up to God to decide what your fate is. And so appealing to that passage, you can effectively convince a Muslim in order to not commit atrocity. So I would rather appeal to the moral frameworks within religious books rather than saying that you don't need them at all. Frankly, a lot of people need an ordered perspective of the universe in order to not go insane.
We should actually kind of delve into that topic. There's some interesting new research on some of this. Traumatic brain injury is associated with greater religious fundamentalism. So if you get into a car accident, hit your head, or somebody hits you with a baseball bat or something like that, you are more likely to be you're more likely to have religious fundamentalism. And interestingly, being exposed to religious fundamentalism, so your family, raises you in a very devout Christian or devout Muslim household, that also seems to cause brain injury. It shrinks the size of your hippocampus. And on top of that, there is a correlation between religiosity and IQ. People who are more religious have lower IQ scores. They are objectively dumber. So why would we
but I have an inverse just to be a dick. So the inverse is they had magnets that they used to eliminate the threat, the threat part of the brain or whatever. They just used it to temporarily interrupt those functions. And as a result, people became atheistic, right? They didn't believe in a God, and they became more friendly to immigrants and this, that, the other. But the truth is that you need that part of your brain in order to function. So obviously we should look at the hippocampus and damage done by religious fundamentalism or whatever. But at the same time, being retarded in one way or the other is going to be a hindrance to proper social function. So I don't know if it's enough to say, only Giga Chad 4,000 IQ people don't believe in God. I don't know if that's sufficient.
Well, I'm sure different parts of your brain have multiple functions, but religious belief seems to lower the overall function of your brain. So the parts of your brain that are, necessary for basic things like fear, empathy, they might be to some degree associated with religious beliefs, but fundamental religious beliefs seem to be promoted by brain damage, and fundamental religious beliefs seem to cause brain damage. So it's...
The word I would latch onto, though, is fundamental. I'm not a fundamentalist. I'm not a literalist. And so I would agree. So if you think that dinosaurs don't exist and the Earth is only 4,000 years old, and actually NASA is lying to us, we are on a flat plane and there's a globe over us that matches biblical description, you're probably dumber than most people if you believe those things literally, because what you're effectively doing is you're ignoring all of the contradictory evidence, and then you're grasping on desperately to this one source, and then you're taking the world and you're trying to jam it into your source. You are probably a dumber person. However, I do think that if we eliminate the word fundamental, I work with extremely religious people who are very high IQ, but oftentimes what they're talking about is they're not trying to justify dinosaurs not existing or the planet being 4,000 years old. They're trying to understand what was the revelations to ancient peoples that caused them to say and do the things that they did, and what are the revelations that are being shown to us now that we need to pay attention to in order to live better lives. And so I would view that as probably not fundamentalist, but they are still very religious.
What do you mean by very religious?
They're Christian. They some of the people that I'm talking about are wildly intelligent. I don't believe in the Trinity of Christ being the manifestation of God on the planet. But some of these people that I'm talking about, they literally do believe that the creator of the universe manifested as a specific human being in order to give humanity divine revelation that would make the world a better place and prepare it for God's return.
Well,
and
look,
that is not something I'm ready to jump onto.
These people might be very good at math. They might be able to solve quadratic equations and shit and do calculus that I wouldn't be able to do. But if you have the kind of epistemic standards where reading some ancient book that's been translated at least 3 times, and that's good enough for you to be convinced, oh, well, there was a guy named Jesus who was the Son of God and he sacrificed himself to make up for sins that he created, you're dumb in some kind of way. Like, you can't. So, I know, like, intelligence is very general, so if you're just have a higher IQ, you're probably better at math, better at reading, better at critical thinking in general, but these people clearly have a huge lack in at least a particular type of critical thinking.
Well, I would say that the primary motivating factor, if I had to be very callous, would be death avoidance. So, like, I'm just going to admit it. Permanent non-existence, permanent oblivion terrifies me. Pain, suffering, I don't care about that. I could suffer I have suffered for prolonged periods of time and endured to the point that I was able to come out the other side. Permanent non-existence and oblivion, if I think about it for too long, it can send me into an existential like panic attack, basically. And so the fact that we're all careening, you and I are inevitably circling the drain of potential non-existence is terrifying. And so the only rationale that I can cling to as like a life preserver, as a relatively rational human being, is that there's obviously a sense of order and creation in the universe. And therefore, I kind of understand there to be like a deistic God, like the clockmaker, like something that just kind of manifested creative and ordered will into the universe. And I'm ultimately not going to worry about whether or not there's an afterlife or life after death. That's his problem. That's his thing to deal with. I'm just a fucking ape. I'm just a manifestation of the divine spark in reality. But whether or not I exist for 30 more seconds or billions of years is totally outside of my control.
I'm not afraid of dying at all, and
prove it.
Well, I mean, could hold my breath for maybe like 2 minutes, but
no, I'm fucking around, but
yeah,
you know that.
But
oftentimes, real quick. You can consciously be unafraid of perpetual oblivion, and good for you. My wife actually says that she's similar. However, what I would say is when it comes to a life or death fight, if like a lion came into your room and started like fighting you and fucking you up, you would scream, you would cry, you would fight, and it would be an instinctive reflex of you being a living creature.
Well, yeah, I probably would fight the lion off. I do have an interest in living, but as far as like being worried that eventually I will die, like I'm just not particularly concerned with it. I understand that there are some people who are concerned with it, and that might be not necessarily a rationalization for religion, but definitely a cope. Where, yeah, fear of death, these religious beliefs do give some people comfort. What's interesting, though, is the original Israeli tribes didn't believe in a pleasant afterlife. They believed in Sheol. And Sheol was considered this, like, really dreary, gloomy, joyless and loveless existence where you're basically just locked up in a cave for all of eternity.
There's a quote from Achilles where he had a dream of being dead, and he said that, I forget the exact quote, but it was like, it's better to be a living slave than it is to be the greatest hero that was ever born and be dead. And it was this like concession to the doldrums of Hades.
Yeah, there's an idea within the Conan mythos where Conan isn't really sure if there's like Valhalla, after death, if you die in glorious battle, the gods are going to reward you. He's not sure if you enter this cold, dreary realm I think the cult of his people who worship Crom, they believed the afterlife was just a dull, cold, dreary existence where you'd wander aimlessly for all of eternity. And he wasn't sure what was true, but he said, regardless, it is what it is. I'll face whatever problem is in front of me, and I'll rely on my own strength to kind of deal with and overcome with whatever is in front of me.
Hold on. That is the human, the very human impulse to quote unquote rage against the dying of the light. That's also something that's trained in the military. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, where they basically trained us. You know, they didn't allow you to use your legs. Then they didn't allow you to use your upper legs. Then they didn't let you use your stomach. And then they didn't let you use your arms. And so what effectively happens is, over the course of like trying to run across a field, you're basically using your head to drag your 200-pound body across a field. And the lesson there is to, like, as long as you're conscious, and as long as you have a control of even an iota of will, you use that will to try to accomplish the goal. And that's a very cool story. However, I think what religious explorations can reveal is that, what do you do when you have no more strength? What do you do when you have no will left? When you're being overwhelmed by death or disease? And oftentimes, a slave morality, like Christianity, will say that, well, even without power, even without will, even without wealth, God will still take care of you.
Well, here's what I think. I think there's a burden to existence. Even if you're in a relatively good situation, like, you still have to brush your teeth. You still have to, like, clean, take showers. There is, like, you have to eat, you have to sustain yourself. And like, even people who are very wealthy and successful, they kind of end up having this problem where, how do I just entertain myself? Like, things do get tiresome, and I think people realize that there is, like, just some sort of effort that needs to be put in to sustain yourself, regardless of how wealthy you are. And you can get to a point where you can have all these luxuries, but even with all the luxuries in the world, you have to keep, like, your mind healthy. And that in and of itself is burdensome, and it can be quite difficult just because of the way we kind of recognize pleasure, and there's, like, these weird peaks and valleys. And if you reach, like, really high peaks, well, then everything else bottoms out. And then, like, you kind of have to normalize things to get to a level that's, like, it's hard. Life is just kind of hard. And I think this modern idea of, like, a ultimate paradise in heaven where you're going to experience peace and happiness, I think it's this cope that, when will it finally end? Can we just have the best of both worlds, where I can exist, but not
or the
have
best
to
of
be
all worlds? Yeah.
Yeah, and not have to be burdened. And I don't know if that's a good way of thinking, where finally...
Oh, it's not. It's not, at least not on this plane of existence.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things was there was a pagan Satanist in Norway, and he, excuse me, he was, like, firebombing churches, and he kidnapped some guy and cut him and made him drink his own blood and all this crazy stuff. But something he said that I think had a kernel of truth in it, because they did an interview with him, was he said that the reason why he, as a pagan Satanist, hated Christianity so much was because within all of us is, like, the spark of divinity, like a spark of the gods, this, like, a creative, like, illuminating force that's within all of us, the passions, and all that kind of stuff. And what Christianity does is it effectively enslaves that spark of divinity for the promise of the perfect plane of existence. And so you're foregoing whatever power or pleasure or self-interest that you could have in this plane of existence, in the promise that you will be suddenly unburdened in the afterlife and you will have the best of all worlds, right? Now, that's not what I believe either, though. So I think that he demonstrated that self-worship can be almost as dangerous as postponing all like worldly pleasure for some promised perfection, right? What I try to do is, I have found in Jordan Peterson talking about it, is that human beings are creatures of order. We try to take a chaotic world and make it better over time. And not only that, we try to move from suffering to at least neutrality, if not some level of like base pleasure. And so what I want to do, what I'm going to and have dedicated my life to, is waking up every single day, finding what's out of order, putting it into a higher degree of order than it was yesterday, and also taking some of the suffering that's in the world, because I'm actually doing okay, and then trying to reduce that suffering for other living creatures. And that's going to be my mission today. That's my mission when I'm 90 and I'm on death's bed. If I have the capacity to fulfill that mission in any way, I'm going to do it.
Okay, so why aren't you vegan?
Because I think that it's all graded on a spectrum. I think it's all on a spectrum.
Well,
I also have substantively reduced my meat intake. I probably reduced my meat intake by like 90% over the past like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, but again, if your goal is to reduce suffering for other creatures, why wouldn't you just go vegan?
Because I don't.
You could just check that
all
off the box.
Suffering, yeah, because I don't believe that reducing all suffering to zero is my mission. It's just reducing the amount of suffering.
Yeah, so you'd want to reduce it to less than what it is currently.
Sure.
Yeah, so why don't you just go vegan?
So number one, my priority is humans. Number two, I do grade living creatures on a scale.
Let me actually
Number
write
3.
these points down because they're kind of interesting. Give me a second. So number 1 was you're focusing on humans?
Primarily,
Okay.
not exclusively. Okay.
Yeah, primarily.
Number 2, I do grade living creatures on a scale, I would say, of like IQ and EQ and capacity for suffering. So I wouldn't view eating a squid or an octopus the same as I would view eating a mollusk. I think those are different things.
Sure.
And then finally, I would say my goal isn't to end all suffering, all violence. My goal is only to reduce it.
Okay, so let's go through some of these point by point. You're focusing on humans primarily. Zoonotic disease transmission is a huge problem. So there being many flu outbreaks. The worst one in the last century was probably the Spanish flu. Wasn't technically the Spanish flu. It either came from a farm in the United States or from China. Those are the two most likely sources. And that killed, I think, 50 million people over the course of a few years when that outbreak occurred. That is from people raising geese and ducks and chickens for food. We could have avoided 50 million people suffering and dying, and that's only the deaths. That's not including morbidity, so permanent damage and debilitation from like severe illness. So that was likely very many millions more. We could have avoided that if we didn't raise these fowl for food.
Would we even have the logistical capacity? So we're talking about like what, the early 20th century. So I don't even think we would have had.
We would have.
We would have, but I don't think we would have had the cultural interest. Like we could probably better argue about the future. I don't think anybody would have the cultural interest in order to do that. And then also, hold on. Here's why I want to complicate your math a little bit. So Europeans used to be disgusting city-dwelling, zoonotic disease-consuming freaks who lived in these urban sprawls filled with piss and shit. And as a result, we got like cholera, we got, you know, smallpox,
Typhoid, yeah.
we got this, we got that, we got all these horrible diseases. And then eventually we kind of like standardized, modernized a little bit, started throwing our shit separate from our drinking water, all that kind of stuff. But we killed like, I don't know, 60%, 70% of our population in some viral outbreaks. Well, what ended up happening was you could make an argument that the Native Americans of the Americas were living a more like wholesome, sustainable, balanced, you know, life in concert with nature. But when they came into contact with our zoonotic, disease-loving city folk, they got fucking wiped out. Like 99% of their population got wiped out. And so zoonotic exposure to diseases or exposure to disease in general isn't necessarily something that I'm always trying to prevent. I think it's like a fire, right? It's like you're going to have wildfires every now and then. You should try to prevent them maximally possible, but they're not always going to be preventable. And there could be a downstream effect that's worse.
So do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea that we eradicated the world of smallpox?
It's a good idea, of course.
So do you think it would be a good idea or a bad idea to eradicate the world of flu virus?
If I thought it was possible.
Okay, so the idea of eliminating animal agriculture so that we don't have pandemic diseases like flu virus, coronavirus, I think there's a few others, but those are the two big ones right now.
I might be a good idea. I might be jumping ahead, but we might agree. Would you care? So, for instance, one of the things that they're working on right now is lab-grown meat, where they're allowing the creature's alive, right? But you take a culture of shoulder cells and growth cells, and then you grow it in a petri dish with like sugar, water, light, all that kind of stuff. And then as a result, you can replicate like hamburger and steak. So in my ideal universe, if we consume that product and there was not more cancer than the regular meat, and we were able to reduce animal suffering almost completely by growing lab-grown meat, then I would opt for a world where like 99% of meat production was lab.
Why not all of it?
I'm assuming that there's going to be some religious people that are going to hold out. And even though they're causing animal suffering, effectively, in order to get them to give up their religious beliefs, we would probably have to kill them.
No, you could just tell them, well, if we had a law saying you can't have animal agriculture, they just wouldn't be able to raise animals. And if they did, they'd just be imprisoned. Like, why would that be an issue?
Right. So, well, you're at minimum talking about cultural genocide. So, you know, there will be Jews. There will be Jews and there will be Muslims who will talk about kosher and halal. They will say that even if it's not all of them, it will be some of them. They will say that lab-grown meat is not halal or not kosher. And as a result, we have to continue animal production and they're going to try to continue it. So you do have to imprison or kill them eventually.
If I'm interpreting their religious beliefs properly, as long as it's blessed by either an imam or what's the Jewish equivalent again?
Rabbi.
Yeah, rabbi. It would, by definition, be halal. Because there's two aspects of halal slaughter. The animal has to be raised and killed in an ethical manner. So it can't be like dirty, mistreated, stuff like that. And the death has to be quick. So with lab-grown meat, there's technically no death that occurs and there's no ill treatment. So that would fulfill that obligation. And I don't know if they care. I'd actually be interested to see what a rabbi or imam actually thinks about this, or if they'd even consider it like meat technically. But if they
I'm sure
care,
you could get 80 to 90% of the population to switch, especially if there wasn't like an increase in cancer or any health concerns. I still think that there's going to be like a reflexive human aversion to like synthetic meat, basically. And so as a result, you're going to have to contend with those people and you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to jail or imprison them or whether or not you want to just allow a minimal amount of animal suffering.
By the way, we already do that. There are religious cults Jewish and Muslim religious cults and African. I know this is a weird thing in some African cultures. I've seen this happen a fair bit in New York. There are people who raise
Jews have like a
animals.
holiday where they beat the chickens against the walls, and it's part of like a religious ceremony.
Not just that, there are people who literally raise animals in like their backyard in fucking New York when they're not supposed to, and they do it for religious reasons, and they do get jailed. So like we already don't have a problem with that.
Sure, I'll tell you what I was trying to do. So oftentimes, veganism. I'm not saying you necessarily, not based off of your reputation at all. But vegans and vegetarians can often be limp-wristed progressive liberals. And so they would have a very passionate argument for why like animal cruelty is so horrible. But then when you ask them whether or not they would be willing to enforce these things by state violence, they oftentimes balk at the concept of it. So the only reason why I was pushing you on it isn't because I necessarily disagree with it. It's just because I wanted to push you on it to see if you were similarly limp-wristed.
So there are some jackasses that I have had personal issues with. One of these fucking dickheads is named Darren Chang. He claims to be a vegan. I'd say by definition he's not vegan. He claims to be a vegan activist. He is an absolute fucking cunt. He's one of these like social justice warrior fucking pansies you talk about. This jackass has said he's against banning the seal hunt in Canada because it would be a white colonizer mindset thing that
like
forces native people to not adhere to their own traditions.
Right.
Like, that is just pure fucking utter nonsense. And again, by definition, you wouldn't be vegan if you hold to that position.
Well, and I am a ideological chauvinist where I do believe that my beliefs are demonstrably better than a substantive amount of other people. And so if you believe that your ideas are better than other people's beliefs, then at some point there needs to be
and I absolutely
a time in which you're comfortable to impose them on others.
Yeah, and I absolutely adhere to that. Like, I'm not going to jail somebody for like cheating on their spouse. Like, that doesn't cross the line for me where I think that's a jailable offense. But if you like willingly transfer sexually transmitted diseases, like you don't tell somebody you have AIDS and you have sex with them, that's something that like crosses the line where it should be criminal and punished. So yeah, there are some things where I think like, okay, that's clearly wrong. I don't agree with it, but it's not to a point where I'd be willing to jail people over. But yeah, certainly when you're talking about killing animals for no like genuine practical reason other than, well, you know, I live in a shitty, dumb fuck culture that can't play video games or something or find any other way to entertain ourselves, so we club baby seals to death. Fuck you. So, yeah, they absolutely should be jailed. But in terms of, like, being interested in, like, human flourishing, I can understand how, like, you'd promote lab-grown meat. That's fine. I don't have an issue with it. But getting rid of animal agriculture would be a good thing, particularly for zoonotic disease transmission. But on top of that, there's some other, benefits. You are going to be eliminating a lot of saturated fat from your diet. Your diet is going to be free of cholesterol, assuming you're not eating any animal products. Those are the two primary risk factors for heart disease from a dietary sense. If you're replacing these foods with plant products, in all likelihood, you are going to increase your fiber intake, which does have protection against heart disease, diabetes, cancer. So you would likely like a sort of plant-based vegan dietary pattern, especially if it focuses on whole foods. You're likely going to see a decrease in chronic disease and a decrease in obesity. That seems to be beneficial to human flourishing, including on an individual level. Like if you just eat better, you're going to be better.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't disagree. You might find a more willing person than your stereotypical debate opponent who's like, I just like eating meat. And it's like, they don't think about it. No, so just to share, I joined law enforcement in 2015, and I was probably in my late 20s at that time. I noticed that my blood pressure spiked, and also a lot, and it was just stress related. but my blood pressure spiked, and I noticed everybody around me was consistently eating fast food in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I basically saw a lot of my coworkers as walking heart attacks. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to be like that. So I need to change up and figure out what I need to do. So I actually did go vegetarian for, I don't know, probably like 2 years, I guess. And part of it was because when I reduced my sodium, when I reduced my fats, when I reduced my cholesterol, and I reduced my meat take overall, and I replaced it with plant protein, my blood pressure dropped precipitously. Like I was down to like, even being stressed out, I was like 118 over 78, like when I was going for my physicals. And then not just that, my good cholesterol did drop as well. But my bad cholesterol went from like 150 to 190, whatever like the normal range is. I think I dropped down into like 120 or 130. Like I actually had like whatever the normal calcification that can be expected out of your arteries. I just didn't have it anymore. And so I was like, okay, this is dope. But part of my calculation on the moral side too, was I did the math on how many animals I was consuming. And it was seriously like, it was probably like 60 fish, like 300 chickens, and probably a whole cow per year. And I asked myself, would I be willing personally to slaughter all of these conscious beings in order to be my appetite? And the answer was no. Like maybe I would go fishing because I don't really hold fish in like a high esteem. Maybe I would kill a chicken every now and then because I don't hold chicken in high esteem, but I definitely wouldn't be eating it every single meal. Right. And so as a result, I've probably gone back up on meat a little bit because I do like the taste of it. And I would kill some animals to sate my appetite, but I've probably reduced my meat intake by like literally 90%.
Okay. Since the next 2 points you had were I grade living creatures on a scale of sentient suffering, and you don't have the goal to end all suffering, but just reduce it. I think I might as well just run name the trait on you because that's yeah. So can you name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in a human being would justify killing and eating a human being?
No. So what I do is I do a combination of like IQ and EQ combination.
Well, yeah.
And then then I assign like a moral value to creatures based off of that. Like as I brought up, like a mollusk, I would say in my opinion has less moral virtue than let's say a domesticated dog.
They're probably not sentient. In all likelihood. So I wouldn't expect
or it's extremely limited.
Yeah, so I wouldn't expect you to really value a mollusk because in all likelihood they're not sentient, and even if they are, it's like nothing. They don't
it's like light and clockwork,
or it would be like light and dark sensitivity or something. But there's clearly like some sort of criteria where it's sufficient enough where you wouldn't think it's like morally acceptable to kill just to satisfy a taste pleasure. So like a human being, you wouldn't think it's okay to kill a human being to satisfy taste pleasure. So
yeah, I also believe that about octopus, whales, and dolphins.
Yeah, sure.
Because as far as I can tell, in my understanding of like biology and zoology, dolphins are incredibly complex, incredibly intelligent social creatures. And then same thing with whales, and then same thing with octopi, where octopi are just like, they're brilliant. Like their brilliance is only limited by their environment and evolution, but they're actually like incredibly intelligent creatures.
Yeah. So you said you'd be okay with like killing chickens, fish. What about like a cow? I'm assuming a cow. Like
cows I'll do on occasion, but to be honest, I do feel guilty about it because I know they have the same level of like social and emotional intelligence as dogs oftentimes. Same thing with pigs, but then pigs brings up an interesting moral conundrum. So as an example, wild hogs replicate at such a fast rate that you can cull half of their population in order to maintain their population numbers. And so in an ideal society, if there was population control, same thing with grizzly bears, by the way, that if hunting was exclusively for population control, I wouldn't see a problem with consuming the meat created by population control from hunting. I don't think there's a moral issue there.
Okay, so let's just maybe leave that for later, but like clearly there's a sufficient level of like intelligence or wisdom or something that you think it's a moral wrong to kill. Clearly humans are sufficient. Cows may be sufficient because you feel guilty. Like dogs and cats, I am assuming they're probably on that level where you wouldn't be okay with people killing and eating dogs and cats.
I'm not. There's also an added virtue there where cats oftentimes, although they're a horrible problem for birds, and so I think that cat population should be controlled. Cats are viewed as, or have been used historically as kind of like a natural rodenticide, right? You know, they hunt vermin, that kind of thing. And then same thing with dogs. Dogs we've used as like loyal guard companions and agricultural co-workers for like centuries, if not millennia. And so as a matter of fact, I think our relationship with dogs might go back like tens of thousands of years. And so I feel like we've created a symbiotic trust between domesticated animals and humans. And so we should never really violate that trust, because they're relying on instinct in order to have a relationship with us. And so us being the conscious agents and then violating that pact is actually like an evil on our part.
Okay, so like pigs would have a lot in common with dogs. In fact, they're often considered more intelligent. We don't have a similar relationship, but like, would you say it's okay to kill and eat a pig?
So with pigs, it is interesting because they do have the IQ that's comparable or even greater than dogs. They're also socially intelligent creatures. I would say that I would view it as a moral good if we got away from like pig domestication and then exclusively did population control on feral hogs. I wouldn't see any problems with consuming feral hogs.
The reason there's feral hogs is because of pig domestication.
Maybe, but at the same time, they had to be wild originally in order for us to domesticate them, right?
Well, yes, but the wild hogs you're talking about in the United States, they're here because of domestication.
Domesticated diet. Well, yeah, but at the same time, you don't want to genocide the entire species, right? But you probably want to keep the population under control.
Well, the idea behind population control, like, would ideally be eradication. That's why there's no like hunting regulations around feral hogs. You can kill as many.
Well,
as you want.
I don't even know if we could eradicate them, even if we tried.
Well, but, we could if we stopped pig domestication.
Sorry, you're saying that if we eliminated pig domestication and we hunted feral hogs into extinction, then we wouldn't have a feral pig problem.
Yes.
Okay. And you view that as a comparable good to eradicate both populations compared to keeping them in domestication and perpetual hunted status.
So the issue is, if you domesticate them, there's a risk that they'll escape and then become feral. That's where these feral hogs originate from. They originate from pigs being farmed, escaping into the wild, and then they become feral. I don't know if you could have like farm sanctuaries or something where you have these pigs and they wouldn't end up escaping and becoming feral. Like, obviously the risk exponentially increases when you're talking about millions of pigs being farmed, as opposed to maybe like a few hundred or a few thousand on farm sanctuaries. And in those situations too, they're also spayed or neutered. Right. So even if they do escape...
But let's just assume for the sake of conversation that I'm skeptical of whether or not we could eliminate the pig population. But let's just say that, like, in your ideal, we would eliminate domesticated pigs and then we would eliminate feral, and then we wouldn't have a problem anymore. In my ideal situation, we would probably substantively reduce domesticated pig slaughter, and then we would just maintain the feral hog population.
Okay,
but hold on.
Okay, well, yeah, sure, finish.
Well, I was just going to say, for domestic hog farming, ranching, whatever you want to call it, too, though. I think it's in Denmark or it's in Finland. They've effectively bred pigs to reduce their fear impulse when they enter claustrophobic spaces. And then they've used a room. I forget what kind of gas it is, but it's like non-toxic. It's like CO1, CO2, something like that. But what they do is the way that they kill the pigs for slaughter is they put them in a room and then they use a non-toxic gas in order to eliminate them. If a pig panics, then they eliminate it from the population. And then most of the pigs like lie down, fall asleep, and they don't even realize that they're dead. And so for my thing, if we're going to have the slaughter of animals, then any animal that was to be slaughtered, I would want there to eventually be a process like that where effectively the animal doesn't even know that it's dying. It just goes to sleep and then it doesn't wake up.
So, okay, well, first of all, I think you should watch the documentary Pignorant. Joey Carbstrong made that documentary. It's free on YouTube. You can see what happens in pig slaughter. The main method of stunning for pigs is CO2 gas. That is one of the most painful ways you can possibly kill an animal. CO2 is acidic, so it'll burn your eyes, it'll burn the inside of your lungs, so that in and of itself is incredibly painful. But on top of that, there's a very like ancient inbuilt survival mechanism in most animals to panic when CO2 levels in your blood increase. This even bypasses fear centers in your brain, like the hippocampus. So you can even take human beings that have a damaged hippocampus. They don't feel fear. You can shoot a gun at them. They won't be afraid. You can put them in a room filled with CO2, they'll fucking panic and freak out because there's some inbuilt mechanism inside your brain to protect yourself from CO2, and most animals have this. So not only are you causing them immense pain just from the acidity of the CO2 gas, but they're also fucking terrified as shit. As far as I understand, there's not really any way around that. And you can watch the documentary Pignorant. You can see these pigs being lowered into these CO2 gas chambers. They absolutely freak the fuck out, and they're clearly in horrible, horrible pain. He also interviews some of the slaughterhouse workers there. Some of them have accidentally been exposed to the CO2 gas, and they talk about how fucking horrible it is. Their eyes are burning and they just start hacking up like fucking crazy because of how acidic the gas is. And this is the main method of stunning for pigs, CO2. So you're talking about millions and millions and millions of these animals getting put to death.
Then what I would say is the Norway is what I was pulling up, but even like the top 5 articles that I was pulling up was effectively saying that it was sold to the public a certain way, but the realities are different. I would need, more time to substantiate, but I could just take what you're saying on faith.
Yeah, what you're saying sounds like bullshit to me. It sounds like a marketing thing that I
wouldn't be surprised. The stories are 5 years old, and literally the top 5 stories that I pulled up when I Googled humane pig slaughter Scandinavia or whatever. When I Googled that, it was literally like, Norway sold itself as the humane place to slaughter animals, and yet abuses remain. And so that's the way that the articles are popping up.
Yeah.
So just taking that on face value.
I would recommend you watch the documentary Pignorant. It's on YouTube for free. That might change your view of some of this.
Well, I also don't eat pig. Because if somebody, if they like accidentally put it on my burger or something like that, like maybe, but I never order it. I almost exclusively don't order it. So I don't incentivize pig production, by purchasing the product. And then I also just, I just don't do it. But if that's the case, that I've been sold the humane propaganda that isn't true, then what I would say is I would go back to the lab grown. I would ideally see like the entire industry move to lab grown, where slaughter of the animal is not required in order to produce, hopefully, non-carcinogenic meat, any more carcinogenic than actual meat is.
Yeah, so that's fine, but the problem still remains that you eat meat and you're supporting an industry that kills animals. So I would just like to know, of the animals you do eat, it might not be pig, but if you eat chicken, fish, beef.
Fish is probably the one that I care the least about.
Yeah, so of the animals you do eat, whatever those are, what is true of a human that is not true of those animals, that if not true of a human, you'd be fine with killing and eating a human?
Well, yeah. So I might just jump on the rake then. There might be, so we work down these gradations of intelligence and emotional intelligence to the point that we don't feel bad for consuming animals anymore. And I would say like chicken and fish are probably either there, they're probably just there, right? Chickens, I probably feel a little bit bad because I have met some nice chickens in the past. And so if I was raising chickens, I wouldn't slaughter them. I would exclusively use them for eggs. But we're kind of on the cusp there. Whereas fish, I literally think they're like primarily lights and clockwork. I don't think they have particularly like rich emotional lives. I think they're in fight or flight a majority of their existence. I think that the options are either being predated upon by humans or being predated upon by other fish. The ocean is an unforgiving place. So we talk about very low IQ and EQ of fish. I think that's probably where I would land. And then I'm assuming, but you could follow through on your train, that you're saying that there are low IQ and EQ humans that would then therefore be consumable under my moral framework.
Yeah, so assuming a human being had the same sort of mental capacity as a fish, presumably you'd be okay with killing and eating those humans.
I guess.
Okay.
So obviously there's the human species loyalty element of it, where you don't want to like, so for instance, like if there's like a retarded child who is housebound, who can't do anything and doesn't have any intelligence, doesn't have any emotional intelligence, obviously I'm not going to kill them and eat them out of a respect for like interspecies or species loyalty. But that's probably the only thing, separating it, right? Like you could try to steel man my position. Do you think that there's anything besides species loyalty that prevents human beings from consuming each other once you reach a sufficiently degraded intelligence and emotional intelligence?
I don't think there really is. Like, if we found highly intelligent aliens, like if Vulcans from Star Trek came down to Earth,
Sure.
we wouldn't really care if they weren't human. Like, we'd care about the qualities they have, like intelligence, sentience, sapience, shit like that. So
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really cares about species when they're thinking of like how to treat someone or something ethically. Fundamentally, it comes down to like, what their intelligence is, what their sentience is, whether they can experience pain and suffering. And from my perspective, like, fish certainly aren't sentient. And they are fairly intelligent. You can train fish. They actually have pretty complex social interactions. You might want to read the book, What a Fish Feels. That's kind of an interesting book. You can look at some of the mating habits they have. They actually do have like pretty discerning mate selection. So these are like fairly intelligent animals, and they certainly have a will to live. I wouldn't want to just grab a big net and suffocate millions of them, again, just for taste pleasure. There is some good nutrition we could get from fish, like, fish oils, but you don't actually need fish for fish oils. The reason fish have fish oils is because they eat algae. Fish don't produce EPA and DHA. They eat algae that has the EPA and DHA. So we can bypass that whole step, not have to risk, getting heavy metals like mercury in our food, and then just eat the EPA and DHA, which has the actual benefits. So if we don't need any of these things for human flourishing and well-being, and we don't have to participate in like horrible suffering of these animals, and we can just leave them alone, and like we also avoid chronic diseases, zoonotic diseases.
Well, the one thing that I would push back on even tepidly, like it's not enough to be like, oh, you just don't understand the world, vegan gains. It would be the fact that like I kind of spoke about it earlier, and I think you spoke about it as well. You view us as an extension of, apes, right? Like we're just really intelligent, slightly less hairy apes who are capable of very complex things, right? And so in that way, in my opinion, there's a chain of being, that there's the plant life. There's the animals that consume that plant life. There's the carnivores and omnivores that consume that animal life. And then there's also the scavengers. And the scavengers, consume the dead and transfer it into whatever biological process they transfer it into, right? And so what I would say is trying to escape the moral repercussions of the chain of being is almost an attempt to separate yourself from nature. And so I do think that reducing suffering is a noble goal. I still think that you're going to bump into unintended consequences, which are brought up by anti-vegetarian and anti-vegan activists. For instance, when you dedicate whole swaths of land for certain agricultural crops, you're inevitably going to kill some of the animals and destroy some of the habitats that are necessary to cultivate those crops. So you can still reduce suffering, but you can't eliminate
There's more habitat loss and species destruction with animal agriculture because you need to feed them.
I'm sure.
So again, if the
you're talking
goal
about
is
reduction,
to
not elimination.
if the goal is to reduce, then you should be vegan. I don't see any downside. Like any downside. If your goal is to reduce, hell yeah. So if the goal is to reduce human suffering, reduce human disease, reduce animal suffering, reduce environmental damage, veganism is the only conclusion you can come to.
Well, then what I would say is I'm not there yet. However, what I would be curious in, so that arm is very large.
Thank you.
Did you take any performance enhancing drugs in order to achieve that result?
No, I've been natural my whole life.
So
the only thing that I have taken was a TB500 peptide. That was for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. I had a really bad shoulder injury. All it really does is increase like collagen synthesis and stuff. It's not a steroid. It's a peptide. They are different. And that was just for healing, but it doesn't have any like anabolic benefits.
Then I would say one of the reasons why I still consume chicken and fish protein is because of it's a simple, medium calorie, low fat protein source. So if you said, hey, here's the alternatives, this is actually my diet regimen, this is what I use while I'm lifting, then I'd be happy to take a look at it. Because if it's something where the taste, so for instance, part of the reason why I fight with the wife sometimes about when she cooks vegetarian meals is taste. As an example, Gardein is trash vegetarian.
Oh, you don't
food,
like it?
right? Oh no, I love it. I love it. Like I feel like whatever poisons they put in there, whatever preservatives, whatever.
Gardine's actually good. It's not bad. You can look at the ingredients. It's primarily soy and pea based, and they don't use coconut oil for most of their foods. So if you're looking at like Guardian chicken, I think they use like canola oil or something for the oil.
But she'll switch to the allegedly even healthier brand, which in my opinion just tastes like watered down vegetable mush, right? And so I kind of need that preservative, salty flavor texture in order to enjoy a meal. And so, yeah, so if you have a routine that allows you to enjoy the texture, enjoy the salt, not feel like it's kind of like you're eating pasty vegetable mush, then I would be interested. And, maybe you could save a few chicken lives and a few fish lives through that sharing of information.
Gardein is very good. That's one of the healthier like meat alternatives. The only thing is like the sodium content, but assuming you're drinking enough water, and you're exercising and you're not like only eating Gardein all day, you probably won't have blood pressure issues. Like if it's just once or twice a day you have like a packet of chicken, you probably wouldn't have blood pressure issues from that unless you're like highly sensitive.
No. I work out and try to chug water.
So Gardine's good. Soul Food, Soul Cuisine, that's good. Field Roast is good. The Beyond products do tend to contain more saturated fat because they use coconut or palm oil. They have the new Beyond Burgers that I think they use avocado oil, and I've heard those actually taste better. So
unfortunately, I don't know if they use any kind of dye or something, but my wife has had negative reactions to Beyond for whatever reason. But yeah, I would say I'm not against the concept, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But I also just really like tofu, and I put Korean barbecue sauce on it. Korean barbecue sauce is the fucking shit. And if you just get some extra firm tofu, pan fry it, and then add on some Korean barbecue sauce, cook it for a little bit on low heat with the barbecue sauce on, creates a nice like coating of crispy.
Listen, I don't want to bore the audience too much with my recipes, but fried tofu on pho is awesome.
Yeah.
So like Vietnamese rice noodles with a shitload of vegetables, jalapenos, limes, the rice noodles, and then crispy tofu. That is actually like, that's fire. That's great shit.
Yeah, and there's some easy seitan recipes you can follow. Some of them are remarkably difficult to make. I don't know how the fuck people do it, like they're kitchen wizards. But there are some pretty simple seitan recipes that are pretty much impossible to fuck up. I actually have a recipe on my channel for seitan. Very high protein, low fat. So that's easy to make. But yeah, tofu and seitan are the absolute shit if you just want some like high protein food. And you can always just eat protein powder too if you ever need to make up the difference.
Sick. Well, I'm about to hit 5 hours live. I was debating Pisco earlier, and so my brain is absolutely fried. Also, I do owe the wife some time today, so I need to give that to her. But barring anything else you want to cover, I do appreciate the convo. I do love moral philosophy. I do love theology. I do love religion. I do like contending with these ideas more as what do you think about it versus you're wrong and you're a piece of shit. I more enjoy the contention rather than the zealous certainty, I guess. And then also I might be a hypocrite and a piece of shit in some ways when it comes to like my diet, where I'm saying like I care about suffering, but then I engage in some level of suffering. But I do agree in general that probably for health benefits and also for a better society, we should probably push towards less cruelty, less suffering over time. And I have no problems being a part of that project. So did you want to talk about anything else or shout anything out before we kind of wrap up?
No, I think you should just go vegan. You seem like a pretty
send me the recipes. I'll try them, and if they're good enough, then I'll switch and I'll let you know.
Yeah. But just go fucking vegan. Like, look, if you have your own set of beliefs and you think, there's a certain right or wrong, you need to hold to your own standards. That's why I really like Stoicism. It demands that you adhere to your own values and never let yourself down.
Well, my dad was a huge Stoic philosopher consumer for 5 years, and then he read the Nicomachean Ethics, which is Aristotle's virtue ethics system. I don't know if you've explored that yet. However, he basically said that he wished he had read the Nicomachean Ethics first because he thinks he would have fucked with Stoicism less. So if you haven't explored that yet, then maybe that's on the horizon.
I'll check that out. The only thing I'd say is, as far as the religious discussion, I think the best religion for society is the cult of Crom, the god that Conan followed. It is the most practical and realistic, aside from like the idea that there is this god of strength. Ignoring that, the idea that God does not care about you and the only thing he cares about is strength, that is going to be so much more useful, so much more practical for your own interests. And I think
that's a chaos cultist belief. I'm actually a devotee of the Empire of Man. However, that sounds like Korn, the blood god, in a different form. So I'm unsurprised that a weightlifter enjoys the philosophical precepts of corn.
Well, I mean, I'm a Warhammer 40k fan, but even in Warhammer 40k, Crom perfectly aligns with the idea of, you know, this goal of mankind to control the Milky Way galaxy. How else are you going to control the Milky Way galaxy without, you know, force and strength? So if
That's actually,
mankind focused on strength, we'd own the Milky Way, man.
I'm not I'm not a chaos worshiper. However, I am extremely interested in collecting an army from every single from every representative faction. And the one that entices me the most from chaos are the Iron Warriors, because they kind of abhor the chaos gods and they do worship strength and ironing, sharpening iron. And actually, I don't want to say little known, but little known to me fact was that the Iron Empire was a real space empire that they created during the Horus Heresy, where instead of exclusively attacking the Imperium of Man, they actually carved out miniature kingdoms in real space in which they tried to raise a civilization based off of their moral precepts that iron sharpens iron and you must look to the iron within. So, you know, basically, if I was chaos, I would be Iron Empire.
I think I would be too.
Nice.
All right, but
All right, well,
thanks for the chat,
I'm gonna
man.
run. Yeah, no, it was a blast. And basically, if in a couple of weeks you want to do a Warhammer 40k philosophy of Warhammer 40k, you know, chat, maybe that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd be down.
All right, brother.
All right,
Be easy.
Take care. All right, I just gotta go take a piss. I'll look at the donos in just a minute. I'll be right back. Just got a pee-pee. Oh. All right. That was a good piss.
Please marry me, frown.
Well, I ain't never getting married again. Ugh. So that ain't happening. Maybe if you're rich, but yeah, that's probably not gonna happen. Thanks for the donation, though, Meal Mill. Oh, I didn't realize. There we go.
Some fish collect rocks to impress pot and elm mates.
Yeah, they do.
Unfortunately, this small Japanese pufferfish is dull, almost to the point of invisibility. But to compensate, he is probably nature's greatest artist. To grab a female's attention, he creates something that almost defies belief. Are his fins.
I'll send that to him right now.
In his head, a plan of mathematical perfection.
It's feel or feel?
He plows the sand, breaking it up into the finest of particles.
Wow.
Him noticed nothing will.
Wow, fish are nice. Thanks for the donation, Dodo.
I don't get taste arguments. What if we're serving ground beef raw without seasoning poire? We process food, period.
Well, yeah. You could make a turd taste good if you add enough sugar to it, you know. So yeah. Nobody really thinks meat tastes good. They add a bunch of sauces and seasoning and shit to it. I think you could maybe make a point about texture, but again, you don't need meat for the texture you want either. Thanks for the donation, Meal.
Based and woke.
Alright, well thank you, Tyler. Appreciate the donation, dude.
So it made sense for me to roll it into the Bugatti Veyron, or so I thought. But this is where I made a big mistake, and this is where my big tax implications for this year were way, way worse than I thought. Because if I just straight up traded it in and did a normal traditional finance on this Veyron, yes, I could have rolled it in. But because it's a lease, a 4-year lease, $14,570 a month, I can only write off the down payment over the course of the loan. So 1 year I get to do a quarter, the second year I get to do a quarter, third year. So you see what I mean? So that means right now I have to pay 3/4 of that full gain on the Countach, what I was given for the trade-in. And that was a six-figure sum that I have to pay. Now, over time, I will get it back each year with a down payment. So each month I get to write off $14,570 thanks to this Bugatti lease right here, which at my tax rate, which Kansas, we have pretty high income taxes with the federal. So that helps out a whole lot, in addition to every year having a little bit more of that down payment taken away. It's grand.
Dude, I would hate to have to pay for repairs on this car. Like, you could buy a house for the fucking repairs that you'd have to have on this car. It's just crazy.
Now, there's some independent shops that can do that for less than half, one within driving distance, supposedly, so that might be a big help there. But we are most definitely at the point where this Bugatti ceases being a free Bugatti and starts to become, well, sort of a liability, as much as owning a Bugatti can be a liability. 2008 in the recession to a $10 or $15 million car. Now, which way will this one go? Probably not either way, probably somewhere in between if I would get experience. Was lifting up my skirt and showing you how this all works financially a good idea? I like that.
Is licking raindrops vegan? I think so, yes. Oh my god, that's a cat.
Are you alright?
Get away!
AI is neat. Very neat indeed. Oh, there's a bunch of updates for shit. Hey, new update for Last of Us 2. Oh, there's nude mods. Let me see. Finally. Ellie topless. They need to make her butt visible. I know there's underwear mod now. That's hilarious. Yeah, they got nude mods finally. That's great. No, Ellie is not underage in Last of Us 2. Wait. Didn't we already beat this shit? Swear we already beat this crap.
You should consider sending this to him too.
What in the fuck? Let me see.
In 2018, an orca called Tahlequah gave birth, but her daughter died within an hour. Tahlequah, however, didn't leave her body, and over the next 17 days and 1,600 kilometers, she kept it afloat atop her own, diving to retrieve the body whenever it slipped away, even after it began deteriorating. By altering her feeding and travel patterns, Tahlequah's behavior was certainly unusual. A wide range of emotions, including grief. But, especially in the absence of a dependable bridge between our minds and theirs, many scientists have long been wary of projecting human emotions onto other animals. It's also been thought that they might display irregular behaviors after a death for other adaptive reasons. And, for a while, the paradigm was that humans were exceptional. Other animals were reacting and surviving, while we alone were thinking and feeling. This conception was increasingly challenged during the 20th century. In 1985, for example, a gorilla called Coco, who'd been trained to use some signs from American Sign Language, was told that her kitten companion had died. She made distress calls, and several weeks later, looking at a photo of another kitten, signed cry, sad, and frown. Now, there's a growing pool of data and observations suggesting that some animals, including mammals and birds, might experience what we call grief. In 2003, Eleanor, an elephant matriarch, collapsed. Within minutes, another matriarch called Grace neared and helped Eleanor stand, only for her to fall again. Grace vocalized, stayed by Eleanor's side, and tried pushing her back up. When Eleanor died, a female named Maui approached, positioned herself over Eleanor's body, and rocked back and forth. Over the course of 1 week, elephants from 5 different families visited Eleanor's body. On separate occasions, elephants have been observed carrying the remains of family members, including jawbones and tusks. In 2010, a giraffe was born with a deformed foot and had trouble walking. The calf lived just 4 weeks. On the day the calf died, 22 other females and 4 juveniles closely attended and occasionally nuzzled the body. On the 3rd morning, the mother was alone and still not eating, which giraffes usually do constantly. Instead, she stayed by her dead calf, even after hyenas ate away at the body. Scientists have also begun quantitatively assessing other animals' responses to death. In 2006, researchers analyzed baboon fecal samples for glucocorticoids, stress hormones that spike when humans are bereaved. They compared the samples from females who had lost a close relative in a predator attack with those who hadn't. And they found that the glucocorticoid levels of baboons who had were significantly higher the month following the death. Those baboons then increased their grooming behavior and the number of their grooming partners, broadening and strengthening their social networks. Within 2 months, their glucocorticoid levels returned to the baseline. Researchers have also observed primate mothers engaging in apparently contradictory behaviors while carrying their dead children, like switching between cannibalizing or dragging their child's corpse and carefully carrying or grooming it, suggesting that the mothers were experiencing conflicting impulses towards the bodies. Our current understanding of the emotional landscapes of other animals is severely limited. To get a better grasp on mourning in the animal kingdom, we need a lot more research.
I really like elephants. Elephants are based. Thanks for the donation, Dodo. Okay, I think this is at the part where, I think we already saved Alex, or partially saved her, but we have to go grab something. Oh yeah, Worth of Oregon.
Finish them, Freeman.
Axel Fuzz donated $2. Where do I learn about Stoicism? Where you learn everything. The internet. Just use the Google and start from there. Thanks for the donation, Axel. God damn it. What in the fuck? Are you serious? Great, we're dead. Yeah, we're dead. Oh my god. What a load of shit! We're in the fuck.
Are you going to show us her pussy? Do not deny us her beefy labia lips.
They don't have a full nude mod for Last of Us 2 yet, unfortunately. But thanks for the donation, dude.
Your suit shows signs of stress, Freeman. The antlions are keen to our presence. Expect ever greater resistance as we proceed. Sad fate of these others is our good fortune.
Oh, the antlion babies give you health. That's handy. Son of a bitch.
What did the Freeman expect to find down there? Truly, the Freeman leaves no path to explore. I am confident the Freeman will find a way to open that gate so that he may
Oh, whoops.
a puzzling predicament of the sort this Freeman is in. Solving. I will observe with great anticipation.
Is he gonna kill himself, or? Yeah, there he goes. Can I run fast enough? No, I can't. Oh, it goes... Okay, you need something to slow it down. Fuck. Is there anything else to weigh it down? See if that works. Hell yeah.
The Freeman is an invaluable companion. Pity the generator that requires a Vortigaunt to operate. The Freeman is a quick thinker and a fast mover. I think he will be very glad to save those crates.
What in the hell was that? Oh, fuck.
Detected.
Crap.
What next in the parade of constant obstacles? Fear not, Freeman, for I follow. be complete without a freedom. Behold, across the chasm, that immense repeller device promises and attacks. With the freedoms and agreement, let us find our way to that territory. Vibratory device. These are most effective and
So you have summoned the lift.
God damn it. Hope that border gun's okay. Oh, yeah, maybe it's okay. That's good. Are you thinking of getting any more pets? No. I have seen Black Mirror, yes.
Observe how they fight on below, heedless of our escape. Well, this is all very amusing, but we must not forget the gravity of our errand to heal the unexpected. A poignant scene, an eternity's repose. It brings peaceful thoughts, does it not? Not be unchallenging. The Guardian's presence anti-cells of larval clusters. They are commonly posted near the young. Succulent. A wind from below bears the scent of exile. The stuff we seek lies at the bottom of this pit. Bravely done. When you reach you must find a way to survive. Remember, do not kill the Guardian, or the extract will be ruined.
Muslims are inbred. Donated $2. Let me see.
How spicy do you want to start?
What?
This morning, a commitment to find.
All right, folks. Hey.
You can watch the longer videos later if you want. Okay. Thanks for the donation. Muslims are inbred.
How's the life, you little twat?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Thanks for the donation, Nut Muffin.
Dr. Baker here. Got a couple steaks for my lunch today. Now, as you guys see, there are basically no carbohydrates on this meal, and that's pretty much my diet for the most part. Now, a lot of people will say that there's a problem with that, and that because you don't consume carbohydrates, you're going to have an upregulation, significant upregulation in the amount of gluconeogenesis that's occurring. That is to say that making glucose from alternative sources such as things like fats, proteins, or perhaps lactate. And while certainly gluconeogenesis is occurring, diet doesn't really have much of an impact on that. For those people that say, gluconeogenesis is very stressful on the body and so on and so forth, and we should minimize it, and that's why we want to consume lots of carbs and sugars and so on and so forth. This is some of the philosophy coming out of this. So those are probably involved in sort of things like the repeat sort of camp. The reality is that diet really has very little impact on gluconeogenesis. So this paper here showed that, varying diet carbohydrate concentration from as low as 2% up to 70% had basically minimal impact on the rate of gluconeogenesis. That is to say that there is significant 2 or 3 inches in.
Yeah, so carnivore diet will leave you with very little energy and you're going to be dehydrated. I don't know why you would eat a diet that gives you low energy and makes you dehydrated. Stupid.
Morning, the measles outbreak in Texas growing more deadly. Health officials confirming an unvaccinated school-aged child in Lubbock with no reported underlying conditions is now the second to die from the highly contagious virus.
We have lost a bit of our future, which could have been prevented with a vaccine that is 97% effective.
The victim, an 8-year-old girl named Daisy, according to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who traveled to Texas Sunday to attend the girl's funeral. Afterward, Kennedy, a vaccine skeptic who has spread misinformation in the past and downplayed measles risk, writing on social media, the most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine, his most direct statement yet. More than 600 cases have been reported nationwide this year.
The only reason he's saying this, by the way, is because he knows if he doesn't, he'll lose his job. Like, this jackass is in part responsible for some of these deaths with the nonsense he's been spreading. It's just a joke.
Here, more than 480 of them in Texas alone, including a
Is that meat in front of him?
Yes, those were steaks he was cutting up and eating. Thanks for the donation, James.
14% spike in just the last week.
We just don't know how bad it's going to get.
Megan Messick owns this daycare where the rapidly spreading virus has infected 6 kids and says she's frustrated with the federal government's response.
Our city needs more. We need more federal help. Our testing is behind. I mean, kids getting tested on a Friday and we're not getting the result.
Muslims are inbred donators, I forgot. Let me see.
We have in many of our culture, especially in the Western culture, that somehow you shouldn't marry your cousin, you're not allowed to marry your cousin. And I get a bit concerned about that because we also don't want people to think that, okay, your cousin means that she's like your sister or he's like your brother. You're not mahrams to each other, isn't that correct?
That's
because
100%.
You're allowed to marry each other.
That's 100% correct. I think a lot of the times people have, the wrong perspective of who is family and who is not family. And as you
If you allow first cousins to marry, that massively increases the risk of birth defects and mental retardation. This is supposedly one of the reasons why IQ is so much lower in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan, because they very often marry first cousins, and it makes their kids stupid.
mentioned, and sometimes people sit together and they carry on not realizing that this is my mahram, not my mahram, and I'm actually allowed to marry my cousin, and what Allah made halal, nobody can say it's haram. So sometimes you find youngsters, they want to get married in the family, people around, they frown on it, and it's wrong. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha was married to first cousin.
Very good point. Very good point. Ali radiallahu anhu married Fatima.
These people are just retarded, dude. Yeah, but we need more of them to immigrate here. We need their cultural enrichment where they marry first cousins and they make retarded inbred children. We really need that. Thanks for the donation, dude.
Find possible causes of autism within 6 months.
By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic, and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
Health Secretary RFK Jr. promising during the president's cabinet meeting that he will find out why autism rates are rising.
We've launched a massive testing and research effort that's going to involve hundreds of scientists from around the world.
In 2000, about 1 out of every 150 children was diagnosed with autism. Today, the CDC says it's 1 in every 36. RFK says the numbers are closer to 1 in 31.
That's a horrible statistic, isn't it? And there's got to be something artificial out there that's doing this.
Experts say some of the increase is due to more awareness and a broader definition of autism spectrum disorder. It is possible that a yet unknown factor can also be contributing to the...
I've seen this argument made. It still doesn't account for the increase. So some of the increased numbers can be accounted for diagnosing, but and diagnostic criteria, but it only explains it partially. So there has to be some other mechanism involved.
The rise, but research thus far shows genetics and advanced maternal age can potentially increase the risk.
To come together and say that we're just going to get a bunch of scientists together and get an answer by September, that seems a little far-fetched. I will say a lot of good can happen when the scientific community comes together and collaborates with a unified goal.
RFK, long a vaccine skeptic, has raised questions about a possible link between the measles vaccine and autism.
Yep, there it goes. Here it comes.
Despite dozens of high-quality studies refuting the claim. And Kennedy has tapped a previously discredited vaccine skeptic, David Geyer, as a senior data analyst.
There is some worry that there could be some bias, or this research may not be responsibly looking for a correct cause.
RFK did not offer details on...
Whatever, what you got? All right. I don't know how much of a surprise it's going to be.
Is it acceptable to marry my cousin? If you want to marry her, go ahead.
Surprising? No. All right, I failed.
It is halal. Now...
Sorry. I didn't think those were going to be the next words that came out of it. And for anyone asking, he's just talking about first cousins.
It is halal. Now, for some reason, this is something people make fun of Muslims. Oh, go marry your cousin, go marry your cousin. Yo, bro, we marry cousins all the time. People have been marrying cousins for millions of years, bro. And yes, the chances of a birth defect might be increased, but it's not to the level where Allah knows us. Allah knows best.
I will credit him. He does acknowledge that there is a risk of birth defects in children as a result. So at least he acknowledges it.
It's not to the level where it's going to be dangerous. My parents were cousins. Look how I turned out.
Brothers and sisters.
Yeah, retard.
God damn, this video. This is a gift that keeps on giving. Jesus.
My parents were cousins. Look how I turned out. I have brothers and sisters who married cousins. I have lots of people in my family who are cousins who are married. Absolutely not a single issue in any of my siblings' family ever. So, you want to marry cousin, go ahead. You don't want to, go find a halal badi.
Halal badi. All right. So this is like actually a thing in some parts of the world where there's high rates of people marrying their cousins. This is a fact of life. Thoughts?
Thoughts of what? People marrying their cousins? Hey, do you?
You know, I've
ain't got to do nothing with me.
I actually had a family member try to push that shit on me. It was actually, I looked at them like, are you a fucking idiot? You know how bizarre it is too, because you grow up with these people, you see them at family functions, they're family, so they're off limits. And then you just have some random uncle aunt just be like, what if you married this one? And I was like, are you fucking sick? And genuinely, they look at you like, they looked at me like I was the stupid one. It's just so weird because they raise you around these people and you have them treat them like family.
Yeah.
And like, so how do you feel about fucking your family member? And it's just like, just on the emotional, mental side, it's such a bizarre experience. But that is the thing that people do, and it does create risks for kids coming out with serious birth defects. So it's not something to be taken lightly. And in places where there's a lot of marrying your cousin, the amount of birth defects with kids is substantially higher.
Yeah.
So it is important to say, oh, he's making it sound like it's not a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It is. And there's a reason why people put, oh, we've been doing this for a million years. There's a lot of things that people used to do for millions of years. They used to not wash their ass.
Wash your ass.
Wash your ass. There's a lot of nasty shit that people did for a very, very long time.
Wash their ass.
Yeah, remember people used to do stuff in regards to medicine without ever washing their hands?
Yeah.
That was normal. And then you know what they found out a million years later? Oh, if you're trying to heal somebody, it might be a good idea to disinfect shit.
We need to kill shit over there.
Practices that used to be around before. You know, people
That's
used to...
not an excuse.
Oh, yeah, we used to marry 4-year-olds back in... I don't care.
No.
Don't mean you guys still do that shit today. You know better, do better. But at the same time, I can't be that mad at him because the faith he follows says this word is absolute and it will be for the rest of time. We don't update the way Christians do. And so as a result, we're just going to follow that. And that's... He's following that doctrine.
It's certain Christians that update, but...
Sure.
There's definitely more update than Muslims.
Sure. So that's one of those things where it's almost like on the outside you can be like, yeah, that shit's fucking disgusting. But at the end of the day, if that's what you believe in, this is what we're going to do.
There's nothing to really like comment on this.
There's no cousins.
What? It's like I've never looked at my cousins like that. It's.
You never look at your cousins like if we weren't blood?
Whoa.
No?
No.
What about you guys watching at home? I want you to think about your family members. Are there any of them
That's a request.
Want to bone for the rest of your life?
No.
Well, yeah, that's Muslims. There's a reason why they're all stupid. Thanks for the donation, dude. Oh shit. Not supposed to kill him, right? Oh shit. Well, that was an oops. Damn it! God damn it. Where am I supposed to fucking go? think you're supposed to make it run into shit, but I can't figure out where to make it run into stuff. Damn it.
Blood toxin levels detected. Signs are dropping.
I'm highly confused. Fuck!
I sense the freemen down below. Activate the elevator, that we may reconvene.
Oh.
I descend. Abide a moment longer, freemen, that we may proceed together. Has done his task. The sins of you have done the hardest work of many entries to this chamber. Truly, life task is in able hands. Such quantities of larvae, such a heady aroma. Tur, langer, charger, gum, excellent. A bounty of larval extract. This should only take a moment. Secretions of the finest quality. Let us return now to the Alexands.
Yeah, we're going there, right?
Truly, Freeman, well done. You bear some traits we thought innate to Forticai.
Do you have plans for summer?
Antlion husbandry was once our
Other than just working out, enjoying life, not much.
valuable compounds. The extract
Might get a Ducati Hyper Motard.
It dissolves her false veils that divide the vortessence. All this you shall witness, men. No pulse. Her heart is stopped. She amps. If we lose her, we lose all.
Why couldn't we have just taken that elevator?
The extra.
What? Why didn't we just take the elevator?
Make haste. Join now as we imbibe the extra. Yes.
Oh, maybe it was broken because of the gear.
Is needed. Agreed. Join us, Freeman. We weave the Freeman's life with hers. Yes, there is a quickening, almost mortal, this bond between you.
Dr. Freeman. I realize this moment may not be the most convenient for a heart-to-heart, but I had to wait until your friends were otherwise occupied. There was a time they cared nothing for Miss Vance, when their only experience of humanity was a crowbar coming at them down a steel corridor. When I plucked her from Black Mesa, I acted in the face of objections that she was a mere child and of no practical use to anyone. I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question. Still, I am not one to squander my investments, and I remain confident she was worth far more than the initial appraisal. That's why I must now extract from you some small repayment owed for your own survival. See her safely to White Forest, Dr. Freeman. I wish I could do more than keep an eye on you, but I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions. Well,
have you watched the anime Orb, on the movements of the Earth? It's about truth and what does it take for society to accept it.
I've not. I've never heard of that one. Let me see. Orb anime.
What if I told you that there's an anime wrapping up right now that somehow manages to completely capture the complexities of our current world? A series written by a
Alright, I'll look into that. Might watch it while I do cardio. Thanks for the donation, Red Lentil.
now, listen carefully, my dear. When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
She stirs. Her vortal form has regained integrity. We have a very immeasurable loss.
Oh, God.
Lie still.
Oh my God. I thought for sure I was dead.
The Combine hunters caused traumatic injury.
A hunter. So that's what it was.
We knit shattered bone and restored circulatory integrity. Yet it was a free man who retrieved your vortessence.
Yeah, that's Gordon. How long have I been out?
A matter of hours.
Hours? We've got to get moving.
A moment longer.
But we have to get to White Forest. It's vital.
No fear. We will put you on the right road. Now, try carefully to rise.
Whoa. I don't know what you did, but I have a feeling I'm lucky to be here.
Come then. I will get you on the path to White Forest.
Vortigaunts are so
Come on,
fucking
Gordon.
cool.
We will continue our hunt for advice.
Vortigaunts are my favorite aliens.
Farewell. Go safely. Travel well.
Good luck out there.
Yeah, Vortigaunts are based.
Be adequate. What the hell does that mean, anyway? I don't know. Sounds like something the Forge would say.
I think I can walk on my own now. Let me give it a shot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Stiff, but I think I'm okay.
Alright, well, let's go, bitch.
The Combine's on the move.
Yes, and they carry Shu'ulathoi, a visor still in incubation pods. They gather and unite the scattered Combine forces.
So that's what we saw in the Citadel. They're sure in a hurry.
They move north with great purpose.
North? White Forest! We have to get there ahead of them.
I know if humans
The
with
Candyman
fear
actor who
not
died
far
voiced
from
them? I didn't know
they
that.
will understand our urgent need.
What are we waiting for?
Take shelter near the repellent device. The humans have their... I do not see the sentries.
Oh shit. There's another one.
Nice work, Gordon. Sorry, I'm still a little weak.
Well done, Freeman. Freeman, you dispatched those guards with great dispatch. Come now.
Overheard that you had a shoulder injury and that you used a peptide to heal it up for 3 to 4 weeks. What would you recommend me take similar injury to cover for some? I think you meant collagen. I took TB500. That's highly effective and it's systemic, so you don't need to inject it anywhere. And BPC 157 helps with angiogenesis. So you can get more blood flow into your tendons and soft tissue if you inject BPC 157 locally. I can't tell you where to get it, but yeah, TB500 is pretty effective.
Is in the encampment above. This lift will carry us to where the vehicle awaits.
Thanks, Gordon.
Puzzling. The sentries should have spotted us by now.
You think the Combine found them?
Such a theory is hardly far-fetched.
Hell yeah.
Oh, God. The Combine found them all right.
But came to no good end themselves. Head crabs have had their way with both parties.
Hey, sniper.
Hey, look! Out on that bridge. I think I see the car you were talking about.
Might attend Toronto Veg Fest if I get some
It
work.
appears they attempted
there.
an escape, but made it no farther than the abyss.
Yeah, I'll be at the Toronto Veg Fest.
Well, if they got it over there, maybe we can jump it back to this side.
We recommend the Freeman for this task.
Hey, I'm feeling a lot better.
That condition will not last long if you plunge into the toxins below. We would do well to lend our protection from above, while Freeman skirts the hazards in the pit. This mounted gun may prove useful.
So Vortigern gonna use the gun?
The gun would appear to be powerless. Go, Freeman. I will look after the Alex Vance.
Well, Gordon, I guess it's all up to you. Here, I'll get this field down. Good luck, Gordon. Careful now.
Oh, I don't have any ammo. Sweet. Oh, I'm dead. Think I'll save things here. I'll be on later tonight in a couple hours, and we'll just do a normal stream. But hope you all had fun. Big thanks to everybody who donated on Streamlabs. Appreciate it. I'll be on again in a few hours. We'll just react to, you know, whatever the hell's going on. So, see you later.